So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the fifth and final installment of the first Thomas Insight series. Now, in today's webinar, we will be focusing on remote teams and how to function effectively as a team. Now, my name is Ronalda Barrett. I am a registered industrial psychologist working as a client development consultant for Thomas International, and I'm based in the very beautiful, vibrant Cape Town. Now, I've been working remotely going on almost 3 years now, so this might have provided me with some insight into the topic that we are discussing today. But before we get started, just some housekeeping. In a minute, I will be putting off my video camera just to assist with any connectivity. If you lose signal and drop out the meeting, do not worry, I am recording the session and we will share it with you afterwards. Also, please put yourself on mute during the presentation, but don't worry, we will have a question and answers and comment section at the end of the presentation. Okay, now let's get started. So let me quickly just put my video off. Perfect. Okay, so let's have a look at the learning objectives for the day. Now, recognizing behavioral styles and modifying your behavior according to cultivate more effective working relationships. Now, this is very important. Building relationships within remote teams are very important. So we're going to have a look at that, as well as, apologies, I'm just admitting all. And we're also going to look at strengthening relationships within your team in order to build trust and respect and effectiveness, as well as we're going to look at techniques for staying the course. Now, within Thomas, quickly, we believe that self-awareness is the foundation for people to work more effectively with others. So understanding ourselves, our preferences, our motivations, fears, and how our behavior affects those around us, we are more likely to work better and more effectively with others and within a team. Now, in the first 4 sessions of the series, a big focus was understanding yourself, your motivations, frustrations, how you prefer to communicate. We also provided you with tips on ideas on how others' preferences are. Now, today's discussion, apologies, mainly focuses on the team, while still referring to you within that team or the impact that your preferences, beliefs may have on the team or your interactions. So we at Thomas use our psychometric assessments in order to increase self-awareness and to help us better understand our team members. Now, the PPA is such an amazing tool to help us do that. We even have a team report that you can, what we call the team audit report, that you can use to identify like the team's profile, the culture, strengths and limitation. It's a very in-depth report. So I would like to use the PPA within this presentation. Now, all of you have completed the PPA and received your results. I know most of you are now very familiar with the PPA and the theory that it's based on the DISC theory, as you've attended the previous sessions. But just for those attending the series for the first time, I will do a bit of a recap. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, the PPA is based on the DISC theory. It's called the Personal Profile Analysis and was created by William Moulton Marston in 1928. So he proposed that we perceive the world in a certain way, and based on that perception, we then react in a certain way. So we either perceive the world as hostile, unfriendly, or friendly and more favorable. And from that, we obtain the 4 quadrants that reflect dominance, influence, steadiness, and compliance. Now, the dominance behavioral style is very direct and to the point. So they tend to focus on results, likely that driving force to get the job done, and they tend to be your self-starters and they love a challenge. Now, on the other hand, the influence, with this behavioral style, they tend to be very friendly, positive individuals. They tend to be very communicative and verbal, and it's likely that you will hear them when they enter the room. So their focus is on people, building relationships. So you'll find that those are your networkers in the team. Now, the next one is steadiness. So with this profile, there's two elements to it. On the one hand, there's also people orientation, but preferably more one-on-one. So they tend to be very kind and amiable, taking others into consideration, very good listeners. And on the other hand, they also take a methodical approach to work. So focusing on one thing, seeing it through to the end, then moving on to the next. So they tend to be very thorough. But last but not least is compliance. So with this behavioral style, they tend to focus on quality, so getting things right. They likely follow the rules and also enforce it. Of course, you can hear compliance. They tend to be very much careful and precise, and it's for that quality, to get that quality, and could perhaps be a bit of a perfectionist. Now, the theory states that we can display any of these behaviors at any time, but that we have a natural preference for certain behaviors. Now, using this theory, we are able to get some insight into ourselves and members in our team. While you alone might have completed the BPA for the web series, and your team members may not have completed the BPA, but you're still able to use the principles of this theory when working with your team. So, as it can give us some insight into different behavioral styles, different preferences, which you could link and even identify in some of your team members and colleagues. Yeah, perfect. So next, I have a question that I would like to ask you, so using a poll. And the question is, how long on average does it take us to make a judgment about a person? Their trustworthiness, the competence, their likability or aggressiveness. Let me just open the poll. So you'll likely receive a prompt now. So I'll just give you a few seconds. So basically the options is 0.1 second, 2 seconds, 30 seconds, or 5 minutes. Okay, so about 3 of you have voted already. I'll just give the others a chance. Okay, now all of them are coming in. Okay, just a few seconds for the last individuals. So just think, what do you think on average? How long does it take? Okay, so let's end the poll and share the results. So 33% of you actually said 30 seconds, and then we have an even split for the rest. Now, in fact, it actually takes 0.1 seconds to make a judgment about a person. So in their study, Willis and Todorov, or I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, found that people make judgments about others only after 0.1 second. And these judgments also impacted the decisions that were made about those people. So just to think that you have met someone and they made a decision about you after only knowing you 0.1 seconds, or even the reverse, if it's consciously or unconsciously done, you have made an assumption about someone after a mere second. And another thought, Carnes conducted a study where 46 departments of a university underwent a gender bias habit changing workshop. Now, after the workshop, the participants became more aware of their gender bias and actively promoted gender equality. However, the study further showed that the participants' implicit gender bias did not change. Now, the question is, why am I talking to you about bias and assumptions? So each individual has inherent values and beliefs that are ingrained in us. My colleague shared the iceberg. Each of us have values and beliefs and that impact our perceptions and that lead over and impact how we act, and so basically how we feel about a situation, how we feel about a person impacts, and how we perceive that person impacts how we act and the decisions we made. we make. And this is so important when you consider yourself in a team. Now, I love these pictures. It just reflects the different perceptions that you can have about the same thing. And it's very likely that you yourself feel the same about your job, perhaps, where you see yourself in a certain way, but others might see you differently. So you could perhaps feel that someone doesn't understand exactly what you do. Now, but I like to think of it as our perceptions are our reality. So what we think and feel is very much real for us. It informs us how we behave, what we say and do in any given situation. And our perception of a situation could be completely different to those around us and to the people around us because of our personality and beliefs and values. And the question is, what role does your perception play within your team? So especially within remote teams and the fact that we don't see each other. Now, you will likely connect in life most with the people that you understand. So those who are most probably like you, and are likely to disconnect with those who are least like you. So when looking at the DISC theory, we found that those behavioral styles on opposite ends struggle the most to understand each other and are more likely to have very different perceptions. So take for instance, are the dominance and steadiness behavioral styles. Now, a dominant behavioral style tends to be very direct and to the point. They likely say it how it is, but also they can take it how it is. So on the other hand, our steadiness profiles tend to be more soft-spoken and very considerate of what they say and how they say it. So for a steadiness profile, a dominant profile could come across as curt or rude, even mean and hurtful. And that perception could likely impact the actions that this steadiness person takes, or even the relationship that a steadiness person has with the dominance person, where the dominance person's intentions would have been completely different to what the steadiness person perceived. So our perceptions, in fact, says more about ourselves than it does another person. We are the perceiver, the one that makes an assumption or judgment. Seeing someone as curt or rude could likely indicate that I'm not comfortable being direct or voicing my opinions. I could struggle giving constructive feedback or being honest with fear of harming the relationship. It's good to remember this within your team and your perceptions of your team. So consider those perceptions and ask yourself, why do I perceive it in a certain way? Why don't I like it when my team member does a certain thing or says a certain thing, something in a certain way? Especially now with this loss of visibility when working remote. Understanding and misunderstandings and misperceptions could easily occur between team members, where we normally would see that a person is busy when we're at the office, we don't when we are remote. So thinking that person was very curt and rude in their email or over the phone, while in fact we were perhaps just busy. Okay, now next I want to take just matters that you need to consider in a remote team, especially with perceptions. Is the context. Not to place our own opinion or perception on something, but to understand that we don't know the context. Without understanding another person's context, we may draw inaccurate conclusions and we need to be mindful of it. So reflect on your perceptions, especially when you are experiencing problems with a team member or feel disconnected to that team member. Sorry. So team culture. So every member of a team has a direct effect on the culture. So whether it's the leader of the team or the new team member, the culture of the team is in fact determined by the things that the team does every single day. It's the little things. So what people say and do, not just what they say about their culture, but what they in fact do. And we need to acknowledge our part in the team. So we set the culture just like everyone else in the team. We are just as responsible to create a healthy, trusting team culture as the rest of the team. even more so in a remote team. So we need to take a proactive stance, and you'll actually hear me talking a lot about the proactive stance in this presentation. And I think this is actually a key element to remote working, is proactiveness. It's easy to fall away and isolate yourself, but you need to be proactive. You need to bring your side to the you need to bring something to the table from your side. Okay, so building culture in an office setting can usually involve doing things like dressing up for holiday parties, or attending happy hours or trivia nights, or taking a teammate out for lunch. And these type of things can also be possible within a remote team. So while there may not be an actual water cooler to hang out, there are plenty of ways for you to design and build a culture when working remotely. Now, perhaps think of a team culture as something that organically evolves every day with every shared interaction. So every meeting, email exchange, disagreement, or even like a cat meme adds to defining the culture of the team. So, which means basically you're already playing an active role in building culture, and it's also very empowering. In a remote working environment, that you are able to design and build the culture that you want to be a part of. Your social exchanges, they need to be proactive, like I mentioned, and have intent. I use the word proactive because when working remotely, you won't be dragged to a happy hour as people leave the office. And like I said, you can easily fall away and isolate yourself. And I use the word intent because things like happy hours or busy parties pizza parties or anything like drinks after work must be planned. So otherwise, if you think about it, you likely just sit eating a pizza by yourself in front of a camera. So which does not sound wonderful. I do have some tips. So let's start with the basics. So if you want to build a culture of trust and transparency and openness in a remote team, you need to show that you exemplify things too. So when you're crafting emails, having video meetings, or just instant messaging with a fellow employee, stop and think of your actions and think whether it reinforces the culture or deviates from a culture that you would like to build. For example, if you want to build trust, make sure not to micromanage team members by, for instance, sending rapid fire emails, asking for status updates and stuff like that. But rather take a few seconds before you speak and write or email and just hone in on the skill, so that you consider what you are sending or what you're saying and how. Is it reinforcing the culture that you want? Now, what about like your fun office parties? So make use of video conferencing. Since seeing each other is a basic part of human connection, it can be as simple as having a video call with your teammates after work, or like I said, a pizza party. Just keep in mind that someone will have to organize this, and a specific time needs to be arranged, as people likely have different schedules, and you don't and some people even live across countries and different time zones. So you also want to think about what it means to bring your whole self to work. I actually read something where it says you have to see remote working as basically traditional working. You act the same way. So where you will in a normal traditional working space. So people are interested in what you do outside of work. So what type of person you are, having a place to share photos of your vacation and chat about your favorite recipes is a wonderful idea to create that human connection. And also, you could, for instance, start each meeting by asking everyone how their day or weekend is going, just for that quick check-in about life. And this helps to kick off meetings on the right foot before you jump into all that work. Now, building culture in a remote work environment takes a bit of extra effort, but when done with intent, you can feel just as cohesive as you were sitting in an office space. Okay, then I have this thing that Philip Douglas Jackson said. He's a former American professional basketball player, coach, and he's an executive for the NBA. He said that the strength of a team is each individual member. The strength of each member is the team. And you can clearly link that again with that team culture, knowing that each of us brings something to the table, is part of a team, and we shape the culture of the team. So a team exists for a reason. Now, every single team member brings something to the table. Each team member has a purpose and a reason for being in that team. And by recognizing each other's contributions and valuing what each person brings to the table can help us to work more harmoniously together. So this is especially important in remote teams, as we have lost that work visibility. We may not see the contributions that each person is making, and as a result, value each contribution less. Now, even though the person puts in a lot of hard work, a lot of effort, you don't see that. We likely only see the end result or hear about it. Now, what I would like to do now is just look at the different behavioral styles of the DISC theory and look at what their possible contribution is. And this can help you to think of your own teams and just give you some insight and thoughts about what their contributions could be. Now, the dominance behavioral style is very much that person that gets the job done. They get results. So they're not going to waste time, but they're going to start task, expedite that action. And they're also that person that's going to accept the challenge. So if you put a challenge in front of them, they're not going to back down. They're going to take it on. And they're likely also going to venture into the unknown. They're not afraid to do so. And you will also see that they can create instant solutions by making quick decisions and troubleshooting what's going to work, what's going to get, what's going to be efficient for us to get to where we want to be and get that result at the end of the day. Now, as they like a challenge, they tend to challenge themselves and others, and they very much assume authority. So they're not afraid to take authority and be in power. And next is our influence. Now, with influence, the value that they bring is very much making favorable impressions. So your influence people tend to be very much salespeople, selling the organization and the company and themselves very well. They will likely verbalize and can motivate people to act. So if there's a project happening and you need to motivate, okay, we need to get this done, you go to your influencers. And they tend to generate enthusiasm. So maybe it's not the greatest project, but we can do this. And they create that buy-in, so gaining the commitment from the team. They are also entertaining and can radiate like positive energy and optimism. And as they have this focus on people, they cultivate relationships. And they can boost the morale, and they do show that concern for people. Again, that people orientation coming out. And next is the steadiness profile. So your steadiness people are very much specialists. They are the people that's going to concentrate on the job at hand, see it through to the end, persist until the end, and then moving on to the next. So likely to be very thorough. They also tend to stabilize more excited people. So you'll find with your steadiness people, they do tend to bring a little bit of harmony to the team. And also they tend to adhere to procedures, following procedures. So sometimes when that process is not in place, we likely find a way to put a process in place. They also tend to be very supportive of others, providing a service. You're likely here asking you, okay, how can I help? What can I do? What can I do for you? But also be very much good listeners, so listening attentively to others, and they listen to understand. So hearing what actually is going on, and then again, providing that support if needed. Now, last but not least is compliance. So with compliance, we find that they concentrate on that detail. They tend to be very diplomatic when they work with people, very tactful. They do assess that trouble and risk, ensuring that the best decisions are made. So they would like, for instance, investigate thoroughly to make the best decisions and identify the risk elements and prepare for it. they do tend to enforce quality and directives, ensuring that your people or the team members following the rules as policy and procedures are very important to them. They also do fault find, like I mentioned, so finding those areas that need improvement or where it's not going to work. And we find that they improve standards, so have very high standards for themselves and others, and likely it's going to optimize. And they also like facts and evidence, so they tend to be fact finding. They're not going to shoot from the hip, but rather want the facts and evidence and the evidence to make the best decisions. Okay, so it's lovely to consider this when you are the fact that you can't see your team members and you do work remotely, because the question is, how do we value each other's contributions when we are remote? And like I mentioned, contributions tend to be only valued when they're seen. Here again, I would like to stress the proactiveness of a team. The responsibility of making your work visible lies with each remote team member. It's an opportunity to share and celebrate the achievements that take place every week, which otherwise wouldn't be visible to most other team members. Of course, your team leader or manager can promote the behavior. However, he and she can only do so much because they can't see everything. The team member would need to share from their side as well. So some companies share in the form of company-wide blogs, emails with case studies and pictures. Whatever medium you use, it's just an essential part to make each team member feel part of the bigger picture and connected to the team. Okay. So with building relationships and interacting with others, there is a golden rule. I believe my colleague Larissa already said this. So treat others how you would like to be treated. However, at Thomas, we believe in the platinum rule, which is treat others how they would like to be treated. Now, what I would like to do next is discuss some relationship management strategies for each behavioral factor. And what I want you to do is to as I'm describing the behavioral style, to think of your own team and possibly identify a team member that's similar to the description. Then to consider how you can implement the strategy for them. So perhaps consider where you connect with them, disconnect, and which strategy would actually work for you and which one are you comfortable with. Okay, so let's start off with dominance. So a dominance team member is likely that person who looks you directly in the eyes when you're face to face. So they may come across as being a bit impatient or restless. Things needed to happen yesterday. They could tend to be very brief and to the point, will likely challenge you when you challenge them, and they're not afraid of fight. So this type of team member likely just tells it how it is and can make quick decisions. Now, what they want is that freedom to act, be empowered, to have the authority, and an opportunity to grow, and they enjoy challenges. So with them, be direct and straightforward. Give facts. Don't talk about emotions or chit chat, but rather highlight the results. So, and also when you work with them, ask for their side. Don't force something upon them, but ask their opinion, how they are going to achieve goals. Let them figure out for themselves and allow them to voice their opinions. Don't bog them down with details, with every single excruciating detail. They want the bigger picture. And yes, like I said, don't tell them what to do or force them into a certain way. Rather, ask questions that allow them to discover for themselves. Okay, so next is influence. Now, with an influence team member, it's likely that's the one that's got their camera on Zoom meetings. They likely have this animated body language, using the hands to tell stories, and can likely begin with one story, then move on to the next, even though the first story isn't done yet. And they likely seem very interested in what you have to say and very enthusiastic. So what they want is popularity. So they like being liked, and prestige and people, like people focus, working with people. So, and also a friendly working environment. So with them, be a friend, be outgoing. Don't just talk about work, but actually ask them, how is it going? And with them, don't get too bogged down in detail as well, but rather talk about ideas and opinions and involve them. Um, don't hurry a decision, but rather create a platform to for ideas and stimulating ideas, creating ideas together. So also be interested in them and their feelings by building a relationship with them. And don't be forceful or argue. Instead, explore solutions together. And what you should do is expect them to talk about multiple topics and perhaps jumping around a bit. But once a decision is made about a topic, it's best to perhaps iron out the details to ensure that you both agree, and to afterwards to summarize in writing what was agreed upon. There was so much talked about, so it's best to just summarize. Okay, now next is the steadiness profile. Now, with a steadiness profile, you will likely see that they come across as being very relaxed and calm. They tend to listen more than they would talk. And when they're listening to you, likely nodding their head. You will find them to be very warm and friendly, showing concern for you and others, and almost bring that relaxed, calm atmosphere to the team. Now, what they want is stability and to work in a secure environment. They like structure and to have the time to work at their own pace. So not being forced to work at a fast pace, but working at their own pace. So with them, be relaxed and friendly. They like that amiable, friendly environment, as well as similar to the influence team members. And take interest in them. They're likely going to take interest in you, so do the time to actually take interest in them. And they want to be part of a team, so include them. Sometimes it doesn't come across like that, but include them in a team. As they are so quiet, they might seem to prefer to work alone, but they don't want to work in isolation. Also, when you go to them about a new project or new idea or anything, have the information ready. So and allow them to ask a lot of qualifying questions so that they can understand, and allow them afterwards to think about it, to thinking it through. Don't force them to make an on-the-spot decision, but allow them the time, and don't jump around from one idea to the next, or rush them. They like working, like I said, at their own pace. So, and they don't expect to respond to half an idea, that they would respond to half an idea. And also don't interrupt. When you interrupt them, they do tend to shut down. So show that you're actively listening to them, as they are likely only actively listening to you. Okay, and last but not least is compliance. Now, your compliant team members, like I mentioned earlier, tend to be very diplomatic and tactful. So when this person is in front of you, they might not keep direct eye contact, tend to have a little bit more minimal body language. So in meetings, they're likely the one that's going to make all the notes. And they tend to not speak about emotions, but would rather be more logical and factual. And they likely are more comfortable speaking within the area of expertise. So what they want is an audit environment and reassurance and written facts and information. So they want that evidence, and especially to be able to refer back to, ensure that what was agreed upon is there and understood. Now, with them, be supportive and define objectives clearly. So they like that clarity, knowing what is expected of them. So give it to them. Be detailed and prepared. So they are going to likely ask questions, and that begins to clarify, get that clarity, ensure that you're both on the same page. And with them, be logical and to the point. So similar to the dominance behavioral style, don't talk about emotions, rather talk about the task at hand. And provide information in writing. So afterwards, once you've agreed on something, send an email. Here's what we agreed upon. Here's all the evidence. So again, they have something to refer to. And don't skim the details. Go through. They like that details. They like that evidence, and that's to understand and ensure that quality is going to be adhered to. So, and don't be too general. Rather be specific. And again, with your compliance, do not rush the decision-making process. Give them time to evaluate their options, get all the evidence in order to make that best decision. Okay. So that's just on relationship building, but a key element to remote working and even any traditional form of team is communication. Now, a few weeks ago, my colleague Larissa did a wonderful presentation on communication, and I do want to just touch on communication again, as it is such an important element to successful remote working. So whether you're hosting a meeting, emailing a client, or speaking, for instance, on a phone, communication is central to everything that you'll do as a remote worker. So I just briefly want to look at how to communicate with each profile. So dominance is a good idea to talk to them regularly, give them updates, not all the detail, but just give them updates on the project if you do have a project working on together. And when you also do, ask them what they need to help them to deliver their results. Now, with influence, you do need to allow for more regular face-to-face calls because of that people orientation. So impromptu catch-ups and asking them about themselves and not just about the work. So, and allow them to actually talk through what they're going through, their work, their projects, and let them verbalize what they're thinking. Now, next is steadiness. Now, with steadiness, it's best to have an almost structured approach. So a structured plan to how you're going to have a face-to-face meetings and or update sessions when you're working for the project together. So perhaps sending a agenda beforehand, or just an email saying, okay, we're going to talk about this. This is what we want to do, and focus on how you can support and what they would likely need from you and others. So with compliance, provide detailed updates. So some of the dominant influence individuals might not enjoy this, but with your compliance team members, provide them with that detailed information. Ensure that they have the materials in advance before you meet with them. And also that they have easy access to any information that they would need to perform to their best. So I do have some 8 tips for effective remote teams. Now, the first is to have regular live meetings. Trust is a very important factor for any team, and even more so for a remote team. So if you're interacting by phone, you can't see the team's faces or read their body language. You need to complement traditional emails and messaging apps with regular video conferences so team members can see each other. Remote teams will fail to be effective if they don't meet regularly. Live meetings can definitely help build relationships, nurture those relationships, and grow them over time. So the next one is to create opportunities for people to connect as people. Since remote teams don't have that natural opportunities to bond over lunch or after work, teams should actively create ways for members to inspire and connect and motivate each other. These connection points make all the difference, and it can increase productivity or just general well-being in the team. The third tip is invest in messaging technologies that drive collaboration. When individuals and teams or management use different ways to communicate, valuable information can be lost. If we use multiple technologies, from WhatsApp to emails to this, you can lose information. So ensure that the technology that you use is conducive for collaboration amongst team. And here it's actually important to set up communication guidelines. So just what are our rules? How and when do we use which communication tool? When do we use chats? When do we write emails? Team members can get very distracted, like I mentioned, and lose information, and constant notifications coming in can distract. So the more likely you are to lose information if it's in like a long thread in different platforms. So best to ensure that you have a set guideline in place to ensure that clarity and to use these tools to your benefit. Next is to emphasize the purpose, and then afterwards to emphasize it again. So working remotely, you can lose that purpose. What are you there for? So it's good to reinforce what the team's purpose is, ensuring that the team's goal is clear and challenging and holds true to whether the team is down the hall from you or whether they are around the globe. Emphasizing that purpose is very important. So make it clear how the individual's purpose fits into that bigger picture. And remote workers are often only briefed on particular tasks and given information on that need-to-know basis. And since members can work in silos and isolation, they don't see every other's contributions, like I mentioned earlier, or the effects that they have along the line in the production chain, as they say. So regular team meetings where goals and objectives are shared can assist in keeping the team's purpose front of mind. Okay, so number 6, so manage by objectives. So remote team members need goals to achieve and need the freedom to figure out how to do and achieve these goals on their own. Micromanaging is a waste of time, as it is, even if it's in a traditional sense, but even worse in remote teams. So where you can't see the team and where communication is inherently slower, micromanaging is going to backfire. Rather empower team members to achieve their goals in their way. Okay, now, so I have mentioned this before, so contextualize communication. The context is so important. When you're communicating digitally, you never quite know what the other person is doing at that moment. So remote teams need to actually over-communicate in order to avoid making assumptions or misperceptions or cause misunderstandings. And even in a traditional sense, communication is already difficult, but it's more difficult and more critical when employees work remotely. So on a virtual team, you can't communicate non-verbally the way you can when you're together with someone in person. So the psychological safety is so important within remote teams. Many people will, for instance, say yes out of habit, but it's critical for them to say when they're confused and distracted or even offended. Resentment within certain situations can build, and it can build over time due to this underlying issues that are not being addressed. So, and what can happen is when this digital communication goes rogue, misunderstandings, hurt feelings, a break in trust, all of that can affect the team culture. So it's better to ensure that you contextualize communication, but also if there is something that comes up, be proactive, ask those questions. And then the last, of course, so tip is build the habit of using proactive messaging. So take a proactive stance, like I said, topic of the day for me, proactiveness. Ensure that other team members have the required information. So if you need to send a message beforehand, ensure that they've got the information. When, for instance, if you have a busy day, send a FYI message saying you can only get to it tomorrow, or sending them information beforehand so they don't need to click back to you first. This can ensure that interruptions are reduced, and you can also, for instance, send status updates regularly when you're working on a project together. So key is that proactiveness. Okay, so I'm just looking at our time. So lastly, I want to look at conflict, as it is an important element within the workplace, and it's so unavoidable. People have different styles and perceptions when communicating and getting work done. So resilient and adaptive and creative teams come up with very diverse approaches and ideas. And that's how to get that best approaches and for ideas to surface, we actually need to embrace conflict in a way that's productive and positive as opposed to negative. First, acknowledging it's unavoidable, but also acknowledging that the way we act and how we tackle this conflict can create or build trust or affect the relationship. Okay, so communication happens mostly in electronic world in a remote environment. So as I mentioned earlier, it's very easy to make misunderstandings and cause misinterpretations through someone's tone or sentiment or the things that said over email and chat. So as we don't have this luxury of pulling someone aside and quickly hashing it out. So when I do have some ideas that I like to talk about with conflict when remote. So first, watch your tone when sending an email or chat message. Sarcasm, for example, is one of those things that can come up perfectly normal in your head when you're typing a note, but very harsh or hurtful when someone reads it. So unlike having that organic back and forth with someone in a hall, these electronic messages can sit there and fester. And also start by giving people the benefit of the doubt. Linking back to that perceptions and assumptions. If you do assume, rather assume that they didn't intend to be hurtful, and then simply respond and ask if you can chat to the phone or video to clarify things. In an office, this would be like pulling someone aside, talking about it, hashing it out, moving on. And also without the body language or the benefit of the body language, it also helps to ask questions to get to the heart of a misunderstanding, like, tell me how you came to think of this in this way so that I can understand, or I'm feeling like we're not on the same page here, so I'd love to hear what you're thinking. These types of phrases will help you draw out people's opinions and perceptions. So rather ask, clarify, which is actually a great thing when you want to bring all the best ideas out on the table. And can also help you to emphasize with the person that you might having this conflict with. So do not assume a team member knows all the deadlines and next steps. So if the entire team misses a deadline and fingers start to get pointed, there basically is a reason the person didn't have the information. It's worse because it was assumed they had it, but it was never given to them. So don't assume anything. It's easy to work in isolation when you're working remotely. So don't have all the, if you don't have all the information you need, you can get quickly off trajectory. Rather ask or ensure that you send the information and tell them to, if you need anything else, let me know. So within remote working, it's better to over communicate, to spell it out for people and ask all the questions about things you're not 100% sure about. This will help you create that culture where often others feel comfortable asking questions, and result will avoid conflict. And the best way that ideas can surface is by friction. So using it, because we have different opinions and different perceptions, that friction can cause a lot of creative ideas and new approaches. And so basically ask questions, but also be very careful and intentional when you are in conflict with someone. Misunderstandings can occur so quickly. Okay. Then lastly is giving and receiving feedback. Giving and receiving feedback is so important for us to learn and to to improve ourselves. But it's so sometimes difficult to do. But we need to learn how, and especially in remote teams. It's, yes, on the one hand, it's difficult to see each other, and we're not always able to give the ideas and tips that we are, if we were in front of them, seeing how they work and so on. But if you do pick up on something, it's good to share it. Likely that this person doesn't know it. Now, I want to quickly look at the characteristics of constructive feedback. So, great feedback is specific, not general. So you have to use your concrete and detailed examples to make the feedback real. And next, it's the fact it's descriptive and not evaluative. The goal is to make them aware of the issue, not to condemn their performance. And you should also be clearly owned, meaning that you say, this is what you feel in your observation, instead of just blaming feedback on some other party. And good feedback is also about issues, not people. You can talk about a person's performance, but generally it's not productive to talk about them as a person in an evaluative sense. And another consideration is the amount of feedback you give. Just because you feel there's perhaps 10 or 20 things you want to discuss, hopefully not, doesn't mean they are ready to hear all of them. So it's best to stick to one or two and perhaps at a later stage tackle on again. And also it's important to make sure that feedback is timely. So the faster someone receives feedback, the better it is for them and for them to do something about it. And finally, feedback is useful when it's a two-way street. So anytime you're sharing performance-related feedback, you should be open to it as well. So you're not simply delivering feedback, tough feedback when you're, but you're actually creating a productive dialogue. Okay, so when remote, first consider what it means to give feedback. Ensure that the meaning, what is the purpose of this? What do you like to achieve? Best not to use text or instant messages or anything like that. So avoid those informal methods. It can very much, you lose, misunderstandings can occur. And on contrast, your more emails and more formal traditional forms of writing could be better. However, it's not the best. The best is actually either over video or over telephone. So when you do send an email, begin positively, make sure that you're clear, and after you say that you're open to discuss it afterwards. And then last, like I said, that the best form is video or telephone. You can, of course, prepare yourself beforehand and have it of an open conversation. And very important is also receiving feedback. So when you do receive feedback, it could be very difficult and could be uncomfortable. But when you do receive it, acknowledge that you receive it, signal that you understand, and suggest ways how to use it. Okay, so this is actually a lot of information in a short time, but we are now, in fact, done. So I would like to ask you, do any of you have any questions? I'll just open my chat. Where's my chat now? Okay. Okay, so Candace asks, how do I draw in team members who do not like regular virtual meetings and prefer to work more isolated? So this is very difficult. One way of going about it is to perhaps schedule time, let them know for a more informal, casual meeting, and let each of the team members, for instance, consider something they'd like to share with the team. So what you can do in a meeting is ask them directly to hear from them. So ensure that you involve them. And the more I think that you build that relationship, the more comfortable they become with the rest of the team. It's likely that they might interact a little bit more. But you don't want to put someone on the spot, but sometimes it's also a good thing to do that, so they can easily fade into the background. So try to find your ways. And I strongly believe in asking them. So what would work for you? How can we involve you? I know it's not comfortable, but we'd like to involve you a little bit more. So asking them what would work for them. So are some profiles less receptive to feedback, and how do I handle it? I think there's some profiles, I won't specifically speak about the PPA because there's more to it than just looking at behaviors. As we're looking more then towards if someone's like their EQ, or their confidence, how self-confident they are. And it could also depend on the person. So I don't want to say yes or no, but there are certain ways that you could, sorry about that, my phone is ringing. So there are certain ways, rather just approach them and feel it out initially. And you will see some people actually ask you, will approach you first. Okay. Is there any other questions? Sorry, I don't think I actually answered your question perfectly there, Caitlin. Okay, just give it a minute or two. We still have about 5 minutes. Okay. Is there anyone who'd like to comment? So we are here to learn. So I actually want to, here's another question. So how do we balance the needs of the dominant personalities with the more timid ones? That's a very interesting question. Now, I think this is where you need to approach the dominance person and allow them. So they are likely, your influence and your dominance, you're likely going to hear more about them. You're likely going to see more, and they're likely going to take more center stage. That's why I think if you create a space for everyone to feel comfortable, first of all, and to perhaps speak to the dominance personalities or that influence and say, we do like to draw this, the other team members in, or, and again, creating like perhaps time for certain people to speak. It is difficult to, if you think about it, certain personalities are naturally more communicative. So, and, how do we balance the needs? I think that's where, again, approach the team itself. Is there anyone who'd like to comment from my own team on that question? Sorry, let me just quickly. And any other comments that anyone would like to share, because we are here to learn from each other, and that's because we're now working remotely, learning from each other can be so valuable. So if there's anything you'd like to share, for instance, what's been working with you and within your team, what hasn't been working, please feel free to do so.
Ronalda?
Yes, Alma, please share.
Okay, so I see Candace actually comment in the comment box that awareness is key. So that is absolutely the first step, is that the dominant person needs to be aware of the fact that they have this need of only discussing detail and being very result orientated, while the steadiness person might prefer that one-on-one conversations with one another. So having the team members aware of their own profiles and aware of the different needs each other might have, that is absolutely the first step. And then in terms of balancing the need, I think it comes into play where have your team meetings if you have a bigger team and focus on the tasks, cover what is absolutely necessary, and then have your one-on-one check-in calls with, say, for instance, your steadiness people who might appreciate that more. So I think it's about creating different platforms and not trying to put everything and satisfy the need of every single person with their different profiles in one setting or one meeting. So create different platforms that will work for different people.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. So I think we are in the last minute. So first of all, thank you so much for joining me today, and for if you have joined the past series. past others. Thanks for joining us there too. So I hope you enjoyed the presentation and obtained some practical tips and ideas on how to work more effectively as a remote team. Just some key takeaways. First, be aware of your own beliefs and perceptions, as it especially impacts your relationship with your team. Team culture is also created in your daily interactions, and each team member impacts the team's culture. So, and also another takeaway, so remember the platinum rule: treat others the way they would like to be treated. And last but not least, communication and proactiveness is key in remote working. So thank you so much for joining. I hope you enjoyed it, and have a lovely day further.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ronaldo.
Thank you.